This week, we welcome Doug Song, the co-founder and general manager of Duo Security at CISCO, to discuss the vision and culture behind Duo Security and talk about his journey in information security. In our second segment, we welcome Mike Godwin, Distinguished Senior Fellow at R Street Institute, to talk about digital rights and privacy. In the security news, Microsoft security shocker as 250 million customer records are exposed online. The NSA is offering guidance on mitigating cloud flaws. Multiple vulnerabilities found in AMD's ATI Radeon graphics cards. Brazil prosecutes Glenn Greenwald in an attack on press freedom. And cybersecurity lessons learned from the rise of Skywalker. Also, we may talk about Jeff Bezos' phone getting hacked, because that wasn't in the news this week at all. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM. This message is brought to you by Spirion. The data privacy revolution is the new age of protecting what matters most. Automatically and persistently discover and classify sensitive data with the most accurate solution on the planet. Understand the data within the context of your business and then take actions to control that data so you can operate with minimal friction and comply with the laws and regulations built to protect the personal data privacy of individuals across the globe. This is Spirion, protecting what matters most. Visit them on the web at securityweekly.com/Spirion.
Long ago, a pale rider walked out of the snows of the north, accompanied only with a snow-white pug with blood-red eyes of a demon, carrying a copy of FreeBSD and an uncompiled version of Satan. And that man was Paul Asadorian.
Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode 636, recorded on January 23rd, 2020, right here in G-Unit Studios, where I am joined by Dr. Doug White.
I'm here.
It's wonderful to have you.
I know. I'm
here in studio.
I know. I'm in Larry's seat. It feels like Larry.
We have a beer and a scotch.
There you
I guess
go.
we're just missing a bourbon, maybe later.
Yeah, well, pour it all together. It's just it. some good old grog.
On the lines remotely, Mr. Tyler Robinson from Nisos is here. Tyler, welcome.
How are you guys doing?
We're doing fantastic. You're a little quiet there, Tyler. I don't know if you get...
Oh, it's
Oh, there you go.
from all the talking to you earlier. That's it.
We haven't been talking lately. I know we've both been busy. We need to catch up. We need to catch up and get some projects going. So just a quick announcement before we get into our interview. Make sure you join us at InfoSec World right now in 2020, March 30th through April 1st this year at Disney's Contemporary Resort. Security Weekly listeners save 15% off the main conference or World Pass when you visit securityweekly.com/ISW 2020. Matt Alderman and I are hosting a Container Security Day. I'll be giving a presentation. I'm super excited, which is probably why you hear me talking a lot about containers and Docker and deploying into the cloud and how to do that securely. And if you're interested in doing a micro interview, if you work for a security vendor, like to do that, make sure that you contact us. You can email sales@securityweekly.com or go to our website. There's a form that you can fill out. I am very excited about our guest for this segment. I think in 2017, I did a presentation about relating security to hip-hop, believe it or not. In this presentation, there was an opportunity to mention our guest on this segment, and it was basically how folks in hip-hop had gone from the people who are doing the rapping and laying down the beats, like Dre, and have progressed through their careers to be producers, to like Dre, sell companies and have brands and really progress into a more executive role. And I had to come up with someone or at least one person who had done that in our industry, and it was very easy. It was our guest here today, who is Doug Song, of course, the co-founder and general manager of Duo Security. Of course, one of the fastest growing cybersecurity providers in the world. In 2018, Duo was acquired by CISCO for $2.35 billion. And Doug's been doing this for quite some time. So Doug, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. Great to be here.
It's so wonderful to have you, and I'd like to start by talking, kind of going back in our time machine. I like to start at the beginning in folks' careers and ask you how you got your start in information security.
I've been doing computers, I guess, since I was 8. I grew up in my dad's liquor store, which was one of the first computerized retail environments, I guess. He had worked with some folks and to build this platform to do basic inventory management, and of course, as the son of an immigrant, I get to be the child laborer. So I did a bunch of that work. That was my early kind of experience with computers. My dad was a gadget freak, so pretty much anything that was on TV or if it came out and was the hot thing of the day, he bought it. First Betamax player, first CD player. So we had a modem, and that's how I got into networking before the internet. Really in security, it wasn't until honestly as a freshman at the University of Michigan, where if those who aren't familiar with the University of Michigan, it's a huge university, huge campus, and at the time had a mix of unices, commercial and some supercomputers and so forth that rivaled any enterprise environment you see anywhere. BSDI, HPUX, IRIX, Sonos, Solaris, or Sonos at the time, and it was kind of like kid in a candy store to be there.
Is that where you grew up, Doug? Was it in Michigan?
No. I actually grew up on the East Coast, DC, and then ended up in Michigan for school. But I got in some trouble my freshman year and ended up working for the university for 4 years as a system administrator, securing the campus Unix environment.
That happens a lot. We often find students that get curious, and we're like, "Hey, what did you do?" And they tell us, and we're like, "All right, so you can just come work for us now. That'd be awesome."
Or we'll expel you. Yeah.
Well, I think things were different back then. I don't know. Today, I'm not sure how that might
Today
go down.
they call the police, but yeah. But back then it was like, well, I logged in, and they're like, "How did you log in? We didn't give you an account yet."
Right.
And it was like that was my interaction. Was like they called and were like, "Why are you in our system?" I was like, "Oh yeah, well, let me explain something to you."
Well, in Arbor, it was an old hippie town. This in the '60s, the home of the student anti-war movement. Free love, all this stuff. And so it was also the home of the birthplace of the first open access Unix system. So there was some precedent for this. Cyberspace.org, the grec system, was one of the first places you could just get a Unix shell on the internet for free.
I think I had a shell. Now that you say grec, I think I had a grec shell account.
We all had that.
Yeah. And what's really cool about it is that it also, what I thought was kind of the crossover for a lot of us, right? From kind of the BBS era to the internet, because they also were the first conferencing system, bringing over something called Confer from the mainframe world, called Picospan. It's what the software that powered the well in San Francisco later, but it was a really important system for a number of folks back in the day, as a place for folks to learn Unix and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, so that was what was in the water here, to my defense.
And now, did you studied for your master's where you started working on some of your first projects in cybersecurity-related projects while you were still in school?
Yeah, I mean, that was all part of the work. When I was a freshman and throughout, it was, we were just starting to roll out Solaris and, those early days of some of the Next OS labs, right, that Steve Jobs is basically sending me all these different universities, which had all the legacy 4.3 BSD vulnerabilities and all that stuff. And so a lot of it was trying to figure out how to apply, student labor to the tooling that the university needed to have to secure itself, because we couldn't afford any products, and in some cases the products didn't exist. And so those were the days of like Satan and TCP wrappers and all that kind of stuff. And so, my early kind of involvement in that stuff came from, submitting back patches, working on some of that stuff. But it was a ton of fun, getting to kind of play capture the flag, not exactly capture flag. It's more like we were defending kind of this big open environment with everybody from anywhere on the internet coming at you, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
You didn't attack Western Michigan University in like 1997, did you?
Even if I did, I wouldn't say. But, no, I don't.
Great.
I didn't expect
It's
to
a
get an
great
answer to that
right.
question.
So, Doug, is around the time, were you still in school when you were working on dsniff? Was that like a school project or was that like a side project?
Yeah, that was actually straight after school. So what happened is I graduated college, and my first job out of college was actually a computer security consultancy. Actually, no, I'm sorry, his chronology is not right. I did work at a computer security lab at the University of Michigan called the Center for Information Technology Integration, and it was it's like a lab run by Dr. Peter Honeyman, who's kind of a famous guy in the Unix kind of community.
Yeah, because that name sounds really
he was doing a bunch of interesting systems and security work, and yeah, the dsniff project came about as part of a penetration test that he'd asked me to do, or ordered me to do, told me to, because the lab was low on funding. And so he wanted me to demonstrate to university administrators how vulnerable the university was, and he knew a bit of my history. So that's what it was for. It was, I wrote dsniff as the tooling for a single pen test I did against the university.
Basically to collect people's passwords to be able to show them, like, these are in the clear, this is a security risk.
Yeah. He was planning this whole presentation for the regents, and he wanted the first slide to be all their passwords on a slide, and I said, I can do that. So anyway, I ended up getting all the passwords for the Regents University of Michigan, plus pretty much all the administrators, all the finance folks, and at least one of the buildings there, and a couple thousand more faculty and staff. But it worked. We got the funding.
Just as a fanboy side note to that, I did work at Western Michigan University right before that, and I moved to Colorado. And one of my friends back in Michigan sent me a very early copy of dsniff. And
on floppy disk or floppy disk? No.
Actually, yeah, I think it was on floppy disk. But I used the very same tactic that I used in the presentation and presented the passwords for almost every upper level person at the university I was working at in Colorado. I used dsniff. I ran it over the weekend. It was a big flat network. I got every single username and password by running that little script. And the first response to it was, wow, you must be like really, really, really smart. And I was like, that's right. Yeah, I'm really, really, really smart. Yeah. So you didn't get a lot of credit there, but I got almost fired over it. I wasn't supposed to find anything. It was supposed to come back and go, nope, all clean.
So, I mean, at the time, Doug, did that surprise you, or like how did that impact you when you had like written this tool and it was effective for you? Obviously you open sourced it to help promote security, right?
Yeah, well, to be frank, this is stuff that was happening in the underground for a long time previously. So, I don't know if folks remember tools like solsniff.c or others, but there were a bunch of other sniffers that people have written, just not probably spent as much time software engineering. And so, anyway, it was overwhelming, to be honest, to some of the response I got to it. But also, it led to a whole decade of folks emailing me about, hey, can you help me spy on my wife or this or that?
Yeah.
Like, no, this is not what this is about. So there's some of that too.
Was there any backlash for open sourcing it, or did you have any concerns of how people would use it, or the benefits kind of outweighed any negative connotation?
That was interesting. It was my first experience kind of treading that line of social good and social harm with a tool like that. It was Marcus Random, actually, who probably had the most direct feedback from me at a Usenix, where he basically called me a criminal. And I,
that's Marcus.
It's fine. I actually love Marcus.
Yeah,
Marcus
I do
is
too.
a great guy.
I've worked with him before. Yeah.
Yeah, but he was very, very clear. He's like, this is not a tool that has any real benefit, which I dispute. There was, for a lot of us who are administrators, the ability to demonstrate those vulnerabilities in our own environments. The same kind of flack that I guess we'd see, and Dan got for Satan.
Yes.
When you publish those kind of tools, they're going to be dual use, right, and double-sided, and so.
I completely agree with you, and I had the same experience with this being called a criminal or literally threatening to fire me. And for me, tools like dsniff really proved how simple it was for people to exploit these networks. And I thought this will make such a good point to people who don't really understand what's going on. Is like, I didn't have to spend years in a lab developing a tool. I was able to get this tool, put it together, and run it over the weekend on my ancient gateway computer that I put up over the ceiling. And look, I own you. And then instead it's like, oh, this is absolutely an outrage. The ethical ramifications here are just shocking that someone on the faculty would do such a heinous thing when testing our networks.
But and Doug, a question for you. We've come a long way since then in this world of thinking, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for me, again, I mean, there's one quote from Marcus that just kind of stuck with me. He's like, Doug, you're giving razor blades to children. I don't know. But what I did sort of do was I was more thoughtful about some of the implications of my work, right? And so not only did I work on those kind of offensive tools, but it's what led me to actually develop more defensive technology. And so for almost anything that I've broken, I've worked to build, defensive technology, and very often open source against it. So, as much as dsniff kind of went after all the clear text and plain text, communications, that's why we founded OpenSSH, right? Started that project out of the OpenBSD project. In 2000, I broke a bunch of security products, like not only all these IDSs and so forth, but later things like Checkpoint, Firewall 1. And kind of figuring out how to get past stateful inspection firewalls. But that's where we went and built things like PF, right? The stateful inspection firewall in OpenBSD. And so, for every action, there's the equal and opposite one, and we tried very hard to balance the universe, right, in terms of some of that stuff. At least that was my intent,
Right. Now, shortly thereafter, in 2000, you founded Arbor Networks. Was that the beginning of your journey from engineer to executive, or were you still kind of somewhat in the weeds at Arbor Networks?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think yes. In light of the fact that I was the first to quit my day job to go start Arbor and help build that team, recruit it, build the products, and so forth. But it was sort of my first foray into company building. Previously, I'd worked first job out of college at a computer security consultancy called Anzen. Pen testing, security assessments, a lot of security integration. We were a boutique VAR, reselling other people's products, Checkpoint, but also, I date myself, but like TIS, Gauntlet, right, and all that.
Yeah.
But
that was where Marcus worked, right?
Yeah. Marcus did Gauntlet, first commercial firewall. But for me, doing Arbor, it was a part of reaction to some of that work, because I had seen all these, had tested and deployed a bunch of these products. I felt like I had to read on what was sort of useful or successful or effective or not, but I felt the customers didn't, and you could see it at the time by that was the early rise of this industry around what had been a hobby for a lot of us. And frankly, it was the start of also some of the kind of, I don't know, poorly behaved security marketing and kind of selling through fear and all the FUD and stuff. And so, the intent with Arbor was to go and do something a little different. A DDoS attack is something that you either know you've solved or not. Because in most of network security or security in general, there's like a box you put in the network. The vendor says, see, you're more secure, nothing's happening. And, customers are sort of left wondering, what did I buy? But with, DDoS, which was a real problem. And actually, in fact, we thought it was the problem to solve in early 2000s. 15-year-old kids in Canada, like mafia boys, are wiping out eBay, Amazon, CNN, E-Trade, just for fun. When teenagers could wipe out half the internet just for bragging rights on IRC, internet was not safe for business. And so we started that company to go and solve that problem. And it was one where I felt, it was one where we could operate very ethically. It was very obvious to customers whether we were successful or not. And it also had, value beyond just security, because all the work we did to analyze and model the behavior on these networks in order to identify, anomalous behavior in the form of these attacks, you could use for other things like traffic engineering, capacity planning, routing and peering optimization. And so, so I quite enjoyed Arbor, and that was one of those rare moments in time where we really felt we were creating a whole new category of product, if not a whole new industry, right, in carrier or infrastructure security.
I find it amazing, like that transition. It make it sound effortless from engineer to executive. And in the early days of PCs, when I look back in the history, the early PC companies that were competing with Apple, largely the reason that Apple won to a certain extent, right, was because all those other companies were largely run by engineers and nerds. Apple had this advantage where it had the engineer and nerd with WAS, but it had that vision and just unbelievable vision from Steve Jobs and the ability to drive the company and all those details to push them in the market. Has that changed today? Or how do engineers today create companies and still maintain that vision, without maybe having some of the luminaries like we did back then?
No, totally. I think it's a wonderful time for folks, for technical folks, to think about building businesses. It's the best time, in my opinion, because the hurdles are so low, right? Like if I tell people all the time, like 2 people and a talking duck, are a company in the age of cloud, and like the price of like a $300 Chromebook, you now have a company. But it's also the case. I think what's also shifted is. Not only one, particularly in security, the need, right, is almost every business has gotten hooked up to the internet. Internet security is now a problem for almost any organization. And we're in this, what I think was kind of like a third wave of technology sales, right? Like the first wave, if I recall back to my early days as a consultant, it was really sales driven, right? I mean, I was putting on a jacket, right? Even as a technical guy, showing up at the banks in New York or even at the casinos in Vegas. And, sometimes you really had a bag and literally had a shrink wrapped box, right? The software was in. Thankfully, those days are sort of long gone. And the second wave was really marketing driven, right? The sort of, a lot of tech going into like airport ads, right? I remember I was at Barracuda and they'd taken airport ads all across America, right? Before any other tech company did. And I just remember thinking like, that's kind of brilliant. Also kind of insane, but they were these kind of small company IT guys that just really knew their customer, knew where they'd find them, traveling in airports and so forth, and nailed that. But now in this age of like cloud and SaaS, I think we're in this product-led era of technology sales. The best products win because the barrier for folks to try and try them before they buy them is nothing. And I think it's a super healthy development in technology where, you see it today, like in any category, in any software as a service kind of product, the gap between the top player, like Salesforce and CRM, and the second, like who's even the second? I don't even know. It's like this giant chasm, right? And because everyone gravitates to the best product when the switching costs are so low. And so I love this era, right, of technology and the opportunity for technical folks and engineers to build value in ways that can speak directly to the customers that we're going to try, buy, and use them.
See, I always thought that the best sales and marketing teams win, and that always pained me, right? Being a technology person and a nerd, because I'm like, this product is far superior, but this other company has better sales and marketing. What you're saying, Doug, is you've seen a shift in that. Is that a recent shift where the evaluation cost is so low that the best products are truly winning now?
Oh, totally. I mean, it was a thesis of ours because, back when we started doing 10 years ago, literally, Salesforce was pretty new. The iPhone is pretty new, like about 2 years old or whatever. And, but John, my co-founder, Dr. John Oberheide, got to give him his full credit. He did his thesis on how to deliver security from the cloud. And he spent all this time doing all this kind of mobile security and stuff. And even at that time, I was like, I don't know about this stuff, dude. Like, I don't know if anyone's going to really deploy cloud for this. And, that smartphone, I don't know. It seems like a fad. That's why you need a good co-founder, right? Someone who's a balance for you, smarter than you. But yeah, in those days, that's a lot of what we were testing. One of our core values at Duo is to engineer the business. And that's through trial, experimentation, we're not afraid to fail. Like we talk about, we either win or we learn. And so we try lots of things, especially when the cost of those trials or experiments is so low, right? Online. And so our early run at Duo was to kind of do this all online. We're like, having done all the enterprise security stuff, I said I didn't really want to put myself on planes anymore with what was happening with Salesforce and the rise of SaaS. I thought maybe there's a way that we can go and build an inbound sort of technical marketing motion where, again, folks find us the way they find open source, right? And that value kind of rises up to the floorboards of organizations through the engineers or administrators that use it. And it worked. Like one of our early customers that came in that way was Facebook. They called us one day and said, "Hey, we're Facebook. We want to buy the product." And we didn't have any salespeople at the time, right? I had like a stuffed tiger, right? Or a stuffed blowfish. And I said, "Well, but don't you guys want to try the product first? We had, because we have a record of all the trial signups and all this kind of thing. And it's a free edition, because I'm an old open source hippie. Like, it's free for 10 users. Just use it for a while." They told me, no, we've been using it for 4 months. Just change the name of the account. It's under bitch ass. Like very, very Facebook, right? But that's when we realized that actually that motion of kind of under the wire, right, customer acquisition of customers searching for and connecting to that value in ways that they found open source would work, and that's what we lean into. And I think again these days it's for any entrepreneur, you can do that. You can iterate your way to success, engineering that go-to-market model the same way as you engineer a product very reliably. And so if you're an engineer, you shouldn't be scared of it. It's not some crazy. Yeah.
But now you worked you founded Arbor Networks, right? And Arbor Networks got bought, and so you did DDoS protection, but then decided to go into two-factor authentication. I mean, those are two very. What drove that? I think we heard some of what drove that decision, but that was a pretty sharp contrast from what you're doing.
Yeah, and in fact, I think I took a detour in between. I went to go to an internet TV company because I got so sick of security. I don't know. I don't know. Tom Tochik once told me that like everybody has this kind of falling out with security if they grew up in it, particularly if they didn't appreciate it as a career, but approach it as a sort of first love or hobby, but end up coming back to it. And in my case, he was definitely right. I did leave. I was kind of. What happened at Arbor was we had this DDoS company selling to the carriers, but of course that market imploded in the early 2000s. Every global carrier was putting their exec in jail or going bankrupt. Global Crossing, WorldCom, and so I moved to New York. We got this enterprise line of business spun up, but I saw all the same stuff again, right? Products that weren't all that effective, selling like hotcakes. A lot of customers sort of kind of disoriented around why they were buying or what they needed. And so I left to go do this internet TV company instead. But I came back to security because, and not to do two-factor authentication. To be very frank with you, we had no idea what we wanted to build at Duo when we started the company. All I knew was that there was a real problem in the industry where there was actually one particular case that happened that it was actually important to me. It was a small auto body shop out of Sterling Heights, Michigan called Experimental, got breached, and they're like a small kind of family-run affair. But they, again, spear phishing attack against their finance or accountant, and they siphoned out $3 million. They were a customer of Comerica Bank. Comerica had deployed two-factor. They had deployed RSA, in fact, and the customer had used it. And when both the customer and the bank and the vendor are all kind of doing the best at what's possible, right? That was the state of the art, the best practice, right? Of what anyone could have done back then. And they were still losing to attackers who could get past this with just a phishing email and a live site. We realized that something was really wrong and we needed to kind of throw it back in. And so that's where we started Duo to go and try to go after that problem for what we felt an underserved segment of the market, all these smaller businesses and medium-sized businesses. And so, when we started Duo, it was really with the intention to democratize security, take kind of all the things that we'd ever learned after all these years serving the enterprise, but try to make it possible for everybody to deal with, because that's what was happening. All these folks rushing to the internet, all of them getting laid to waste, right, by these attackers, armed with nothing more than just a few kind of phishing campaigns. And so, so that's what it was about. And we ended up doing two-factor because that's what our customers told us they needed.
Interesting.
And
so you had customers before you had a product?
Yeah. In fact, within our first 30 days of starting the company, two things happened. One is I took Jono, my co-founder, with me to New York, and we sat down with, I remember very clearly, we were in the Goldman Sachs cafeteria with Byron Colley, also heads up the FSISAC, and Gary Owen, who had just left Citibank, which looked pretty shabby those days because the government owned a third of it. He took a job at Goldman. And we asked them, so what are the problems you're dealing with that everyone else is going to see in the next 5-10 years? And they're very clear. It's like account takeover. I say, the thing we're seeing over and over again is our users, not our systems, not our applications, not our networks, but our users are being attacked. And they're mostly and it's very successful, right? And so when John and I kind of spent a bunch of time with small customers, we found that was exactly the same. That they were right? That was what was happening. Especially, and if you remember back in those days, like 2005, 2006, that was when the first Brazilian banking Trojans kind of appeared on the scene, kind of turned that market inside out. As they came over in 2006, 2007 to the US, the American Banking Association issued that guidance, or maybe it's FFIEC, on not using the same computer used for email and for web for online banking, which is crazy. And so anyway, so we decided to go and try to solve that problem, even though we really didn't want to. I remember we were looking at Jono when we sat with this first customer, and they're like, "Hey, we really need two-factor." It was a healthcare provider, the second largest physician or healthcare company in America, 400 doctors in about 30 locations, and a bunch of them were carrying those kind of keychains of two-factor tokens, and one for every healthcare system or environment they were in. And they just said, "We just want to use this, their phone, right? Because doctors have phones, right? That we don't want to carry all this crap and deal with all that stuff, right? Race before the timeout of that one-time passcode and everything else." And so that's what we ended up doing, even though we were pretty depressed about it, to be frank with you. I was
You're depressed that you had found the problem that would lead to success, and you had to come up with a solution, right?
Yeah, but we also didn't want to go up against the 800-pound, $800 million gorilla, RSA. We didn't go up the channel. I mean, they've been around for since the 80s, right? With security dynamics before that. But when our customers told us, no, we think you can do this for us, and so that was the second thing we did. We ended up building that first version of a product, that kind of demo for them, and sold that first deal on kind of an LOI, letter of intent, to co-develop that solution with that first healthcare customer, and kept going from there. But yeah, I remember, I'm going to call it Tom Tochik for this. Tom was, old buddy of mine from Arbor, but he made fun of me at that time. He was like, "Doug, two-factor, really? That's what you're doing? After all the anomaly detection, all the stuff for the banks at Arbor and all that stuff, you're going to do two-factor, really?" I was even sadder about it.
What do you see the next big problem that we're facing for the next 5 or 10 years that you guys are trying to solve? What's the next big thing that we're looking at?
Yeah, well, I think that the continued inversion of control of IT and all the stuff that's going to happen because of it. I'm going to be speaking at this event we're doing in DC next week around Zero Trust. But I just remember back in the day, I was talking with Mudge about this. Mudge used to be he was at DARPA. But it used to be that all the best technology or all the cutting edge technology came out of the government, right? First, it was like GPS, the internet itself, right? DARPA projects. And then enterprises would get them, right? Companies would get them, and then consumers would get them. And now it's like exactly the opposite, right? In this era of consumer IT, consumers get the coolest stuff first, and then businesses get them, and then finally, right, government might figure out how to be able to purchase it. And that has had huge implications for security because of the loss of control, visibility, trust, and all that. Right, if I'm an average employee and I don't want to jump through your VPN and corporate firewall to get to the corporate file server to share a file with a colleague, I'm just going to use Dropbox, right? And so that's kind of the challenge we face today. And I think the biggest problem for security today, in my opinion, is to design it in a way that it can be adopted versus just engineering it to be enforced. Right? We're good at that. We've done that for many, many years and decades. But more and more, if people don't like those hurdles and all that mess and complication ahead of them, they're going to find their own path and go off-road. And so I think the real trick for security, both as vendors as well as practitioners, right, in organizations, is to build security cultures, build security programs, build security technology that creates a paved path, right, where the easiest way to do things is also the safest. And I give credit to, Theo Derad and actually all the rest of the OpenBSD folks for what they did over many, many years. Is that was sort of my early grounding in kind of working with teams on this stuff. But secure by default, right? That really is the trick of it, and it's hard, right?
Doug, you were a
contributor.
Model. You were a contributor to OpenBSD in the earlier days, yeah.
Yeah. We contributed a lot to OpenBSD. We did all the shirts, we did all the logos, and we did all the BSD. So we didn't do the Blowfish, right? That was later. But yeah, all the earliest stuff. We if you see credits there for like monkey.org and all that, that was sort of our crew out of Ann Arbor doing all that work.
Gotcha.
But yeah, a bunch of us in that era, where if you look at your SSH Man page, at least half of those authors were all folks coming out of Ann Arbor and kind of that time frame.
Do you think, I was going to ask this earlier, and here it's come around again. Do you think, Doug, that's put us in this model where you're talking about the consumers get it first, that everything's being driven from there, that we're not being driven by marketing, which I think is good. But does that mean we need to be careful in our organizations to protect the bitch-ass culture or the skunk works cultural idea where engineers and consumers are bringing those ideas into enterprise and saying this is what we should be doing, rather than relying on, I saw this great, because I remember the era when we saw a great campaign on the Super Bowl ad from Microsoft. Do you think we should adopt the product? Whereas now, if we can get people from lower levels bringing things in and saying this is a good thing, that's kind of that whole DARPA idea again, but now pushing it into enterprise.
Yeah, no, I think that's we see it happening in enterprise today. Reflecting the fact that, my earliest experience in computer security was in the first sort of zero trust or perimeterless environments, right? University campus, right? BYOD, right? There's no control the university has over what devices are on its network, and yet we still have to protect ourselves. And so, and you look at modern corporate campuses today, they're trying to do the same thing, right? They're trying to provide open access. They've got, organizational challenges. Almost every enterprise today is like an ecosystem versus an entity, with vendors and consultants and contractors, but also partners, right? Even customers and all this stuff. And when I hear all this, kind of marketing speak around like digital transformation and so forth, what that really means to me is just, we're bringing our customers' worlds into ours. We have all this data now that we have to protect, and the degree of access we provide is much, much different, right, than the very narrow kind of path we used to create for folks, with VPNs and all this other stuff. And so, I think the kind of cultures that security has to follow the kind of industry transformation that's happening in IT, where more and more people get to choose their devices, their access, their applications, and if they don't like it, they'll choose their own. And so, we have to be partners. Security has to figure out how to partner, right, to call to the risk, provide the compliance around things that the enterprise wants to do. And in this way, I think, we get to be the heroes in many cases, right? Like a lot of our customers have been promoted for buying Duo, not for buying Duo, but for how they've deployed it and what it's enabled for their business, right? In terms of bringing other folks safely into their environments, enabling the business to do things it otherwise couldn't do. And we have lots of examples of that kind of stuff that is fascinating. I don't know how much I can talk about, but yeah, the way the businesses are operating today, they need a lot of that flexibility, and I think security can provide it if it's designed correctly.
It sounds like, Doug, that and many of us feel this way. I think that security and compliance is a barrier to innovation and new ideas and those skunkworks projects, and it needs to be just the opposite of that. We need to enable that, but the business also has to enable that too. Yep. I think a lot of the reasons why we have those committees and those groups and those procedures in those rules is because of compliance and because security is sitting there and saying no because there was a security event, right? How do we push forward to allow people to convince both security and the business that, hey, I want to bring in this new technology and it's okay. It means we're going to be better.
Yeah, well, one of the things, I know, we've been hyping up just like the whole industry has, and talking about, this notion of zero trust. But not only the 10-year anniversary of Duo, it's actually a 10-year anniversary of what begat kind of Duo and all the rest of this in zero trust and everything else, which was Operation Aurora, right? The Chinese intrusion into Google, Juniper, Adobe, Dow Chemical, Morgan Stanley, right? You name it. And again, the way in which it came in, right, via browser exploit against a specific user, lateral movement, all the rest. But their reconfiguration of their entire security program, right, in the architecture, right, to something what they called Beyond Corp, which was kind of security, I wouldn't say without firewalls, but where the network location and those traditional perimeter-based controls didn't really matter as much. I think has led to kind of this opportunity for us as security practitioners to sort of lead a discussion around what infrastructure and access can be and what it can emit and how it can enable the business. So, for instance, we had a customer, a very well-known customer. I won't name them, but a hardware manufacturing company that started a hardware business, and they had this new product set that they were building across all these partners, like in Pune in India, like in Shenzhen in China with all these ODMs, and Singapore and so forth. But they needed to partner with them in very, very agile ways. Maybe give them only this component and spin them up for like 4 months to deliver, and then take them back down again. And they can't build traditional corporate infrastructure to do this, right? Any given time frame. But neither can they trust, right? Sort of full tunnel VPN access into their corporate network and all this stuff to get them right to the data they need. And so leveraging kind of some of our stuff, we did implement with them what was a zero trust kind of approach, right? Let's validate not only those users as they come in, but the health of those devices. Let's make sure again that we can tailor that access, right? And automate some of the management of some of that, so that, for instance, users who haven't logged in for 45 days automatically deprovision, right, from their two-factor credential, and you don't have to go manually go and deprovision all that stuff. But anyway, that kind of approach to how we can extend the enterprise security program to environments where you don't have, enterprise control, and those users aren't even your employees and all that kind of stuff. That's actually what the real, I think, impact and story of zero trust as a security architecture is sort of enabling. And I think, Wendy Nather says, she's on our team, used to former analyst for 451 and former CISO. But she says all the time that, zero trust is not going to be a buzzword or marketing thing, hopefully for very long, because it's just going to be called security, right? This is just the way we should be doing security, or should have been doing security, like Google figured out 10 years ago. And I do think that's the opportunity before us today, that the intersection of design thinking, tailoring access, building kind of these paved paths that can be adopted easily by users, building kind of security cultures that are blameless, right? Like, even security people click on the wrong link, right? So, you can't really blame anybody for this stuff anymore. You just have to make it safer. And I'm really happy to see the industry and our kind of community start to think about this stuff more in those ways, like as like a public health kind of initiative, right? How do we stop people from doing things that are so risky, but make it easier for them to do that?
Doug, I wanted to just transition quickly to some things about Duo, not technology necessarily related, but culture related. When I think of Duo, I think of an outstanding culture, and I think of outstanding customer service. And you've taken Duo from two guys that had a problem and didn't have a product yet, all the way to being part of CISCO for one of the largest acquisitions in our industry's history. How did you preserve that culture and that awesome commitment to customer success through that journey?
Yeah, well, I guess what I say is people talk about that a lot about preserving culture or keeping culture and so forth. We never talked about that like that, to be honest. At the outset, and this is kind of the outcome of us all having had experiences, some positive, but many negative in other organizations. You learn that at the end of the day, what's most important are your teammates, right? And how you treat each other and the values you hold, right? That govern that. For us, it was actually all a program of cultural development. Like, how could we grow a culture and have that culture help support, operationally, a business that not only treated our employees well, but treated our customers really well. And so a few things, one was we just, and maybe it's just an artifact of where we are. We're based in the Midwest, so we are, 800 people, but 500 of us are here in Michigan. And, the culture that's here is something based out of the University of Michigan, right? One of the world's top universities, but also, at least at one point, the world's winningest college football program. Mm-hmm. Not anymore, unfortunately. But that led kind of to us kind of thinking about 2 or 3 things, maybe. And also, the counterculture, right, of the 60s, right, in Ann Arbor, right? Not only were the home of the kind of anti-war movement, all these hippies, but we were also the birthplace of punk rock, right? Iggy Pop and Stooges and all this stuff. And so, I like to say, Ann Arbor's a city of, geeks, freaks, and jocks. That's what it is. Mm-hmm. And it has a lot to do with kind of what is it we have then selected for, right? Like, what we know, right? We like to find folks that are like creative, right? Freaks or hackers. We like to find team players. And we like to find fast learners. And those are probably the most important things, right, for us as we think about who's part of the team. It's not about like how much security experience have you had, in fact, 80% of our team has never had any prior experience in our industry, and that was, to be honest, sort of by design. But a large part was just kind of having a grounding in how we wanted to treat each other, holding that bar, right, being very, very clear about the fact that there's certain behavior we would accept and there's certain behavior we wouldn't. And very often culture is defined by the worst behavior that you will accept, unfortunately. And so we just chose to be very intentional about how we did that. And the point of all that anyway was that, being a small company out of the Midwest, we knew that we weren't going to hire like a ton of, veteran technology people. There's just not that many technology companies here. We know we're going to hire a ton of security people. That doesn't exist so much here either. But we wanted to do, because, we weren't going to be smarter, we weren't going to work harder, we weren't better looking. Like, what we knew that we would really be focused on is how to operate better as a team, to learn together, new routes to success that our competitors wouldn't. Because the only way that as a small company we'd be successful disrupting like an RSA was if we came up with our own path to success. If we simply copied RSA's playbook, there's no reason why we should, execute that better. So we would have to figure out ways to disrupt what it is that they were doing. And so that's been the formula for our ongoing success, over the last 10 years, because it's not enough just to get ahead, but you have to stay ahead. Mm-hmm. And that means, you have to do things you've never done before, which is an exercise in learning, right? And so that's been our focus. We're a learning organization. We've, tried to stay very humble and very thoughtful about that. If you're a security person, you realize this quickly, especially if you're doing both offense and defense. You can be deep pants at any time by some random 14-year-old halfway around the world who, finds a vulnerability in what you've done. And so it's really important to stay focused and stay fresh and learn together, right? That's our second value as a team. And then anyway, the third, this is the thing I think is probably most important. It's been led to our kind of maybe unique success, I don't know, with Duo, building user technology, is to be kind of the necessary, which is to say that we go out of our way to help each other be successful on our team, but also in our community. Our sales mantra is help, ask, and we never kind of, talk about ourselves or anything before we talk to a customer. Like, the point is to help, right? And so we often will engage customers, or they engage us with asks, right? Like, how should we be thinking about this? Or, we refer customers to other people's products all the time. But, what's important for us is, again, that we work to support and develop a community that gets better over time together. And that commitment, I think, is what's helped lead to our success. It's not just about your company or whatever, but it's the communities that you operate and it's the communities you serve. And that being able to stay close to those problems so we can solve them is really important. I don't know how you guys feel about it. I meet so many CEOs in this industry who can't even demo their own product. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's sort of like ridiculous,
So what do you think is kind of the next? So two-factor was kind of the iteration past passwords, and we've learned that passwords is obviously a huge issue that we're trying to figure out and solve. You guys have got the two-factor if they can adopt it, which has been done. What do you kind of feel the next iteration of that and digital identity is?
Yeah, so I'm, it's funny. There's this whole scene out there, less like a security scene. There's I call them identirati, but all these sort of folks who've, kind of been studying this forever. And I just think it's open source. We've contributed a bunch to a set of standards and technologies that I'm very proud to say, and it's taken a long, long time to finally get there, but originally started out was called U2F, or Universal Two-Factor, work that Google had done, and we supported Yubico as well. We were the first commercial implementation of that as a two-factor vendor, but and it was again a way to bring every different kind of modality of authentication into a single sort of protocol, right? That could be used. But that's now led to evolve towards something called web authentication, which is actually pretty exciting. It's been ratified by the W3C, or the World Wide Web Consortium, as the standard to replace passwords on the web. And it's decades decades too late, I guess it's to say, but better late than never. And what's probably most exciting about it is by now, with our help and others, a number of our folks on Duo Labs sit on the working group and have worked with a whole bunch of folks to create this open standard. It's now baked into every major browser. It's in Firefox and Safari, it's in Chrome, it's in Edge. And what it enables, again, is in effect passwordless authentication, right? Using devices, using bridging consumer authentication factors like Touch ID, Face ID, Windows Hello, maybe some crazy biometric that you'll implant under your skin. I don't know, but we have this open ecosystem that's available, and I encourage anyone who's interested in it to check out some of the stuff we produce, because we've gone to extraordinary efforts to evangelize some of this stuff. If you check out webauthn.io, you'll find an entry point for a whole bunch of documentation and tutorials and open source libraries and everything else that we've put together so that any organization out there can get ready for that passwordless future. But it's something we're proud to help lead the charge on, and I think I can't be happier to see it's finally happening.
And Doug, is that deployed today? And there are countries outside the U.S. that, in order to access government and resources within the country, have implemented passwordless authentication. Is the WebAuthn, that's one of those, correct?
Yeah, well, it's not quite to, the standards are all keep catching up, and, it used to be, all these NIST standards, federal standards and authentication in security are tough, right? Because typically they're written to last like 5 years, but the market moves much faster than that. And so, a lot of the electronic authentication levels of assurance, right? LOA 1, 2, 3, 4, et cetera, that the U.S. government has had for a long time, which governs a lot of how that's done pretty much everywhere else. For a long time, we're not really capable, right, of contemplating how that stuff fits into its world. It is now. And, NIST has done great work to, kind of catch up to a lot of that stuff by focusing on the outcomes and not the mechanisms, right, of how things get done. And so whether it's WebAuthn or even Zero Trust, like NIST has a new draft publication, NIST 800-207, that outlines a Zero Trust architecture, something that, Google obviously did with BeyondCorp, we've contributed to, and a lot of other folks did as well. But, more and more, there are these open standards, I think, will get sort of formalized to a degree where there really is a hope. There really is a hope that we should be able to move past passwords at some point in our lifetime. But I think it'll be a long time, to be frank, because there's so many legacy systems. There are a lot of things people like about passwords, and so we'll see.
Doug, you've evangelized for tech folks to become entrepreneurs, yourself being one of the shining examples. What I thought was most interesting when I was researching for this interview was your book recommendation for entrepreneurs, which very closely ties to some of the folks here, myself included, in some of their favorite hip-hop, really favorite music of all time. Yeah.
Well, I think you called out, maybe hip-hop and WuTang. So yeah, it's the WuTang manual by the RZA, who one of my personal heroes. I mean, look, if you're an entrepreneur, there are all kinds of sources of legitimately useful and maybe more immediately practical business advice you're going to get and all that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, I just hate business books, like one idea done in 300 pages. The reason I like that book, if you're an entrepreneur, is because it helps you dream a little bit, right? It's inspiring. It's inspiring in a way that I think few books are around that journey, right? Because I saw myself as a RZA or whatever, but WuTang Clan was unique, right? They were the first rap dynasty. They were a bunch of rappers. I mean, they were rap trios, Run DMC, duos, EPMD, all these sort of folks before them. But the WuTang Clan was a dynasty. They figured out how to create many and multiple successes, right, in multiple eras, right, of that game, and also did it in a way that was really true to themselves, really true to their community, Shaolin, Staten Island, and has literally created like a legacy. It's crazy to me to think that my son, in high school is gonna probably be like a Wu-Tang fan, like decades, all that stuff. It's like oldies now, right? But yeah, there was something very, very special about kind of how they operated, and the lessons I took away from that I think are valuable for folks to consider are that, particularly for folks who are not in the Valley, right, which is often seen as the headquarters of tech, or whatever, be encouraged, right, that you don't have to do it there, right? There were folks who told me all the time, oh, to be a great tech company, you got to be in the Valley, and I was like, well, we built Arbor Networks, not there.
Right. Yeah, and WuTang was at Staten Island. It wasn't in, Brooklyn, right? It wasn't in L.A. It wasn't Bronx, where that hip hop in the Bronx, where all of that hip hop was really stemming from. They were off literally on an island.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to be said for that, right? Not having that shiny object syndrome, right, or not being distracted all the time by what did someone else do, or where what's going on over there, and when you have room to stretch out and think, we're going to actually afford to buy a house, right, and live somewhere. When you actually build a team and in a location where the quality of life is such that you actually can take care of them, right? Like you can pay for the healthcare, you can make sure they get 4 months of parental leave, you can make sure you pay their jury duty, military duty, whatever else, like that stuff is really important, and I think. That is one thing I think is a unique and strategic advantage for folks. There's something strategic about any place, right? You could set up. The trick is how will you leverage it, and how will you be thoughtful about how the circumstances of your environment are a strategic advantage. And so that's what I found fascinating about kind of the WuTang history. They did that. They did that in ways that were very, very unique at the time. Because otherwise, who would have thought that hip hop crossed with a bunch of kung fu flicks and stuff would be like a breakout success, right?
That's awesome. That's awesome. Doug, I just have 5 questions. They're silly questions. There's no right or wrong answer, and we ask them of every guest. So, are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
Yeah, man.
3 words to describe yourself.
Skater, hacker, punk.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Ooh. Oh, man. I don't know. Something sanitary.
Blowfish. Come on,
Cling wrap.
I don't even know, man. Can't answer. I'll pass.
Something sanitary was awesome answer, by the way. If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Oh, God. I don't know. Kind of necessary. I try.
In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second? That face was classic. It was classic.
That was the look we expected.
Yes.
All right.
This is a psychological evaluation. Actually, we review the tape later and come up with a psychological profile.
Yeah. I feel like these are like replicant to the testing questions.
That question's going to replace passwords eventually.
That's right. Yeah. Pass is an acceptable answer. Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
Oh man. Golly. Damn it. These are hard.
There's no right or wrong answer, and on the air we don't judge you.
Yeah, it's just later.
I don't know. I don't really. I don't track a lot of popular culture so much. I mean, I watch movies and TV and stuff. I just don't all that stuff. But I guess what I say is, I do have some personal heroes. I say maybe Ian MacKaye from Fugazi, because when I was a teenager growing up in DC, going to shows, Fugazi was a very, very important band for me early in my young adolescence, in terms of how they operated their business, in terms of how they were ethical, in terms of how they kind of raised above just kind of music in support of causes and justice. So I've always thought that guy was awesome. And then the other might be Ian's not gay, so I won't.
That's okay. They can be male, female. We won't imply their sexual preference either.
Genetic engineering is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then another might be. It's also not a celebrity.
It's okay.
But Bertrand Russell, philosopher, one of my favorite philosophers, but also committed to social justice, practical kind of. Actually, I'll scratch that. There's a different philosopher I like better. She's just won the MacArthur Genius Award here at U of M, which is pretty impressive. We actually had 2 folks this year do that. But her name is Elizabeth Anderson. So she's also a philosopher who's very, very practical, right? Thinking about democratic justice. What does it mean to be a ethical human being in the society that we actually have today, right? Not sort of in the abstract. And so, I don't know. I feel like parents, their job is to make sure that you don't get in trouble, right? And you sort of, set the right ground rules for yourself to be a productive member of society and not turn into a serial killer. So that's what
there you go.
Or at least be a sanitary serial killer.
That's right. Doug, I want to thank you so much for your time. It's been fantastic having you on the show. That hour literally flew by. So thank you so much for appearing on Paul Security Weekly.
All right. Thank you guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Doug. With that, take a short break. Come back with Mike Godwin. Stay tuned.